Xander.
Hello everyone, this is Sirr's Movies, the official podcast of SirWaka.com. I'm your host, Sterling Woods. I'm joined by
Evan Todd-McCoy.
Well, welcome to the show. Actually, this week we're taking a break from the normal format since the new releases were a little light. We figured we'd have some fun and discuss our favorite go-to movies. I'll get into more of what that means a little bit later. You can find more episodes on Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, and other podcast apps. You can contact us at sirsmovies@gmail.com or join the Sir's Movies Facebook group. All right, so let's get started. Before we kind of get into it, I just kind of wanted to go over what we thought our go-to movies were. What was your interpretation of that?
So what I thought we were talking about when we first planned this episode was two kinds of things. So one was like movies where I haven't had cable in a long time. Back when I did, every now and then I'd be like, channel surfing or popping back and forth from something that had a lot of commercials, and some movie would be on, and I'd get sucked into it, and I'd start watching it, and I wouldn't stop. And then ever since I cut the cord, nowadays it's like there's certain movies where they're like, I watch them once a year, maybe once every 18 months or so, generally as a rule. But I only have a few of those that I revisit that much, so that's kind of my combo take on the idea. What about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I have movies that if it's my go-tos. When I'm flipping through channels, if it's on, I'll sit there and watch it. When I'm on Netflix and I don't want to watch anything on my to-watch list, even though they're great. It's just I want to watch something comfortable tonight. I'll go through to one of my tried and trues, that kind of thing. Just the movies that aren't necessarily your favorite movies, aren't necessarily the best movies ever made. It's just those touchstone movies to you that you just find yourself returning to time and time again. And when I was making this list, it kind of made me think about that whole process, because I mean, with the way the landscape is changing. Traditional quote unquote cable services are starting to go by the wayside. I don't know if it's the same in Canada as it is here. It's just people are moving to the Netflixes and the Hulus and all that kind of stuff. So there aren't as many people watching the, direct TVs and that kind of stuff. So, some of my touchstone movies are, they were USA aired them all the time. ABC came on every year at a certain time, whatever it is. And that's just not going to be the same. I feel like TV is going to be more personalized. Because, you're still going to have your Game of Thrones, quote unquote, just those that everybody talks about. Those are big. And 20 years from now, you can think back on the time when everybody watched Game of Thrones. But besides that, just your everyday, day-to-day TV watching is a whole lot more personalized. For people like myself that kind of got rid of the cable. And as I said, more people are doing that. So I just think that's just kind of going to change how future generations think about TV. They're not all going to necessarily have those same touchstones, because it's not about what, TNT put on TV at 7 o'clock every night that everybody happened to see, because it's, not everybody's doing that now. Everybody gets to pick whatever they want to watch. So yeah, I don't know. I just kind of thought about that.
There's kind of a phenomenon too that's changing where, like, when we were kids, you'd watch something and you might only catch bits and pieces of it. Like, you'd ask somebody like, have you ever seen this? Have you ever seen like Conan or something? And they'd be like, I've caught like the middle and the ending on TV or whatever. I think the nowadays version of that is people whose first experience or most of their experience with a movie or something is like memes or Tumblr, or like some kind of fandom or discourse around the thing. So they actually interface with that. And so you're like, they'll know a lot about it, and you'll be like, almost like they'd seen bits and pieces. And you'll be like, well, have you seen that thing? And they're like, no, I've read a thread about it, or I saw it on Tumblr, or I've seen some memes about it, so I kind of know the gist. I kind of feel like that's the new generation's version of catching it on TV in bits and pieces. Like, I remember movies where it took me like 2 or 3 times to get the whole thing, not because I stopped watching it, because people do that now, where like you'll watch something for a while, then you'll get tired or whatever, you turn it off and then finish it the next day or something. That's people will always do that, I think. But I used to watch movies where, like, I never saw the beginning of something until I was older.
Yeah. Actually, okay, so I think that's a good place to go ahead and just jump into it. I'm actually going to start with my number one, as I said, my number one go-to, and it's actually gonna. This was the whole reason we kind of, started this is because of this movie here. This is what made me think about it, because this was actually going to overlap on my favorite movies of all time too, and probably because of the reason you were talking about earlier. That's The Fifth Element. So it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's an awesome movie, but B, it's one of my go-tos because I've seen it just so many times, and I don't even know if it's TNT or USA, but somebody used to play this all the time. So, as I said, back when, we had the television watching, you'd be flipping through the channels and it's halfway through Fifth Element, I'm going to watch it. Because this is just, it's one of those, it's actually grown in cult classicness or whatever. I think a lot more people appreciate it now. But it's just one of those movies that I loved everything about it. And I watched it every time it come on because it's always interesting no matter where you pick up on it. It's a weird, interesting movie and something I could watch 100 times and probably have seen 100 times. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I could easily have said the same thing. The Fifth Element was a mainstay. I like Luc Besson. He makes interesting movies. I even partially liked Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, which is one of the closest things to Fifth Element that there is. It doesn't quite have the same magic, I don't think, of course, right? But what does? I remember
when they were marketing it. It's like Luc Besson's newest movie. It's basically just like The Fifth Element. So, I mean, that's what, it's so weird and so whatever. So that's what kind of put, butts in seats because, everybody that loved The Fifth Element, this was, Luc Besson, the same guy and same weird, quote unquote, otherworldly type, alien type movie. And that's what put butts in seats, So, I mean, I agreed, it didn't live up to it. And I thought the ending was, terrible. But, I mean, it's still, I liked its weirdness. I like him making movies. So, but
me too. I'll always be here for a movie he makes. Like even Lucy, I was very entertained by that terrible, terrible movie.
Yeah, agreed. But yeah, that's my number one. That's even when I'm making this list, when I'm making my favorite movies list, that'd probably be my go-to. That's immediately, that's exactly what I think about when I think about my favorite movies because I could sit down and watch that at any time. But what's as I said, these aren't necessarily in order. This is my number one favorite go-to movie or whatever. These are just five that we just kind of, that struck us. So what would be your next, your first movie?
Yeah, I'm gonna mix it up because I'm gonna have some that are like movies like that, like The Fifth Element, where it's like just something I go back to over and over again, and other ones where it's more about that I would watch them whenever they were on TV. So my first one, just in keeping with the spirit of something that I go back to over and over again, but I have an interesting story for it, would be Blade Runner. So yeah, Blade Runner is a movie that I watched for the first time when I was 15 or 16. And I didn't understand it at all, and I thought it was boring, and it put me to sleep, but there was something about it that got me under the skin, and I just never could forget about it. Like, I'd think about it at random times. A shot or a line from it would pop into my head. I would think about, especially the last few scenes of the movie, Roy Batty's big speech, all the famous moments, those would pop into my head. And then I kept watching it, and I'd go back and I'd watch, and I still wouldn't get it, and then I'd go back and I'd watch, and I swear it took me 4 or 5 times watching Blade Runner for it to really work. And when people talk about movies being the world of dreams, there's that I think it was a film critic, I can't remember the name, said that when the curtain opens at a movie theater, it's like you're going into a dream world. For me, Blade Runner is about the only movie that actually has that feeling, where the plot isn't that important, so I always find myself forgetting details about it, like forgetting exactly when he figures out this piece of the puzzle or whatever. I find that I don't care about that. It's more about the feeling the movie gives me, so I'll go back to that anytime. And I'll watch that movie once a year. I love showing it to people, and I used to, when I was kind of figuring out that I liked it, I was mostly watching it on TV. It would pop up on cable, on Superstation or something like that, TBS, whatever, and I'd catch a bit of it, which is probably why I kept remembering certain parts over others. They would be the parts that I would always see, right?
Yeah.
You've seen Blade Runner, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't particularly like it. I didn't care for it. I know it's one of those major genre-defining sci-fi movies that kind of everything else is based on, and I knew it was quote unquote important movie, and I'm sure I watched it when I was younger, but I didn't it didn't stick. So when Blade Runner 2049 was coming out, I went back to actually, sit down and watch it and appreciate it for what it was. And I know at the time, all that was, new and exciting and all that kind of stuff. And that's probably why, just like Star Wars, just the newness of it kind of is what it made it stick in people's minds. But I didn't particularly, it just didn't land with me. And everybody talks about the Tears in the Rain scene, and it just, I don't know, for whatever reason that didn't land on me. Honestly, I thought Blade Runner
probably.
Yeah, honestly, I think Blade Runner 2049, I thought that was excellent, and that one just kind of fizzled away. At the time it got great reviews. People really appreciated it, but just the cultural consciousness of society, whatever it may be, it just didn't land with that. But honestly, I thought that was an excellent movie, and I really liked that better than the first one.
I like 2049. I think 2049 feels, the cool thing about Blade Runner is that a lot of the things that work or that are interesting about the movie happened by accident. Like they were just making it up as they went along. Not the story, but the way it felt, the way it looked, the kind of dream logic of everything, and the miniatures and special effects. All that stuff was very, very, very accidental or found while they were making it. And it's not deliberate. So 2049 is a great film. I love it. But everything in it is deliberate. So to me, it doesn't have that magical feeling. And I feel like Blade Runner is a movie, and I don't know if you know this, but when it came out, everybody hated it. It was a flop. It took years, like Unbreakable. It took years for people to start appreciating it. And I think it's a movie you have to build a relationship with. Or just ignore it kind of thing, right? But if you're going to get into it, it's like something you got to get into, like drinking scotch or something. You have to develop it. You have to acquire a taste. At least that's how it worked for me. So I'm glad I brought it up, since it didn't work for you, that, you've seen it a couple times. And if it's not going to work for you that many times, a lot of movies you would just say, well, that's that. But Blade Runner is one that I would be curious, if you watched it 3 or 4 more times over the next 10 years, whether your opinion of it just completely changed over time.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate it for existing, and I may watch it again just, on a Tuesday night just to do it. But it's just, I've seen better, sci-fi movies, and the ones that just, stick with me personally better. So, yeah, indeed. All right. So my number 2, I'm a big rom-com guy, and 3 out of my 5 are on this list. So just get into it. Mine is Serendipity. So it's not one of the more popular rom-coms, but I mean, this one stuck with me. I don't know, I wouldn't say the most, but I mean, I love this. I watch it every time it comes on. If you're not familiar, it's John Cusack, Kate Beckinsale. Basically, couple meet when they're younger. Well, not younger, but they meet. They're both in relationships. They have like a moment, like a cute meet cute moment, but it's just not the right time. What happens? So they each get like the meet cute, quote unquote, is over a pair of gloves in the mall. I'm spoiling the movie, but it came out.
Well, I've seen it, but it was years and years and years ago.
I mean, it came out 2001. So if you haven't seen it, who cares? It's just it's not about the plot. It's about just the feeling you get when you watch it or whatever. But yeah, so they meet at meet cute at the mall over a pair of gloves. They're both in relationships, but they both definitely feel like there's a vibe, quote unquote. So they I don't want to.
Let me redirect your energy. Yeah. What the fuck happened to John Cusack? Because that guy is magic. Gross Point Blank is one of my favorite movies of all time. Even his older shit, like Say Anything, going back to the 80s, that movie's amazing. It's a surreal masterpiece. And then all the stuff that people love that he's done, like High Fidelity and shit, that's all good too. So I don't know what the hell happened to him, but now he's just in direct to TV action films, and he's just phoning it in, wearing the same clothes in every single one.
Well, I think he had his moment, back in the 90s. I mean, he's not he's a handsome guy, but he's not like the quote unquote, the Chris Hemsworth or whoever it is these days, where they just kind of put normal guys in cute, lovey-dovey relationship type movies, and he had his moment. And then in the 2000s they start changing who your leading actors were, so he just didn't fit. A lot of other people's kind of made the transition to different type movies. He didn't, but maybe he didn't want to. I don't know anything about him. I just he did. He made great stuff in his era. He's still out there making movies.
Every now and then he's got one that's worth paying attention to, but it's really seldom.
Yeah, but it's just like I said. I think he had his he had his moment. He had his stardom. He's still doing things, but I just he's just not one of the ones that was a quote unquote movie star for
Yeah.
30 years or whatever it may be. But
That's true.
anyway, yeah. So Serendipity, they meet, they split up because it wasn't the perfect time, and they end up, getting back together at the end of the movie. The definition of serendipity is quote unquote the occurrence and development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. So it's just, there are a whole bunch of little cute moments in the movie that happen just because of movie magic or whatever. It's just one of those movies that makes you believe in love and makes you feel romantic or whatever. It's just, I don't think it's a perfect movie. I think it's, I think the script is pretty slow at times, and, everything doesn't work. But the story and what it is, it was just a magic movie moment for me. And that's why it's one of the ones that just always stuck with me. So if I'm flipping through the channels, or well, not, these days, but if I'm just feeling in a mood of watching something comfort, this is one of the ones I may turn on and actually watch, just, to go to sleep or whatever, because it's one of those tried and true movies that I enjoy, that I can actually watch. So that stuck with me. But what is your number 2?
Well, I think I'm going to go with something romantic too. Just because we're talking about romantic stuff. You're talking about romantic love kind of thing, but I'll talk about something that's about romantic love, but also old school literary romance. Romance is a genre of literary stuff that ended up kind of sneaking into movies sometimes. Romance is being an epic that has sentimentality. So Legends of the Fall, a movie with Brad Pitt and Anthony Hopkins and Aidan Quinn and a few other people, Julia Ormond. So that movie wasn't really, I don't think anybody, I don't think it was a big deal when it came out, or I don't know, but it's one of those ones where it's kind of cheesy and self-serious. Yeah. And it's like Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, kind of, you know what I mean? It's from that era where it's an Edward Zwick movie. That's why I forgot that Edward Zwick made it, but Edward Zwick made it. So his movies all kind of have that romantic, sweeping feeling. And if you haven't seen it, it's about 3 brothers who go to war together, and they all are in love with the same woman. And their lives kind of revolve around their rivalry, their bond to each other, their relationship with their dad, and their relationship to this one woman. And it just goes through a huge, it's almost like a Russian novel in terms of covering a huge stretch of time and a bunch of crazy relationship stuff. And I just, the music was really good. It has one of those great Edward Zwick kind of scores. And I don't know, I can't remember who did the actual music, but his movies tend to have good scores. And I thought the performances were good. And I think it might have been the first time that I thought Brad Pitt was actually an actor and not just a pretty face.
See, that's the thing, because I was just talking about John Cusack, and Brad Pitt is one of the the universal movie star sex symbols or whatever. And it's just, I don't think I have no cultural touchstone with Legends of the Fall. I don't remember seeing it all. I just Googled it really quick and just looking at him. Okay, that guy's handsome. That's a handsome guy. Just looking at him right there, because I think in my head, peak handsome Brad Pitt is Troy. That's kind of one of my favorite movies too. I watched that all the but I think that's peak handsome Brad Pitt. But I think that was 10 years later. He's just one of those guys, man. That's just
He's not aging too poorly either. He's he's aging quite gracefully.
Yeah, and now I think he's out of the movie business game, being a philanthropist, doing whatever he's doing now, just being.
Yeah, he's doing smaller stuff nowadays, popping up in support roles. He's going to be in the new Tarantino movie, though. That's going to be his first big movie, I think, in some years. And this was during his period where he was in full heartthrob mode. He was doing this and Interview with the Vampire. Just Meet Joe Black. He was in full.
Oh, that's one of my. I'd probably add that to my dark horses. But Meet Joe Black, that's one of the ones I love watching too.
That movie's enormously long too. Hey, it's 3 hours long. But I haven't watched it in a long time. But since I was a kid, I think. But I used to love it too. I used to watch it. That would almost be on my list. Actually, my list could be filled with Brad Pitt movies. Yeah. I could just do Brad Pitt movies like The Devil's Own, Sleepers. Yeah.
And that's one of the things. That's why he stayed so, top of the movie stardom. It's not only he's handsome, but he always chooses really interesting roles, and he can act. He proves it time and time again. But it's
refreshing to hear you say that, because most of my friends that I grew up watching movies with and getting into movies with, he's really underappreciated. They'd always be like, "Oh, Brad Pitt can't act. He's just a pretty face. He's just whatever." And I was always having to defend him. I'm like, "Have you seen this? Have you seen that?" And invariably, the movies where he actually acted as much as he's just a pretty face or a leading man, those are the movies I never saw. One of his earliest movies, he plays a crazy serial killer, California it's called, and David Duchovny's in that too. And he kicks ass in that movie, and nobody's seen it.
Yeah, I think the Chris Hemsworth. He's kind of. I feel like that's kind of the same vibe. So we'll see what he does over the next few decades or whatever. But I think that they're kind of in the same category. If they were around in the same time, they'd be going for the same type of roles.
That's nice. I like that. Actually, yeah, I could see Chris Hemsworth being like, if we have to say he's nowadays anybody, nowadays Brad Pitt is that's astute. I like that.
Astute. Oh yeah, I like that. I like you calling me astute. So.
Oh, I never said you were astute.
Nah, I'll take credit for it either way.
All right.
Yeah.
It's an astute observation, at least for sure.
Yeah. My next movie, I'll keep it in the romantic world. I've probably seen this movie 50 times or so, something like that, and it's embarrassing to say. And I was actually talking to a coworker about when I was thinking of my list, and I said this movie, and he gave me the side eye because it's just one of those movies. But it's The Notebook. It's one of the cheesiest, go-to when you think about a romantic movie. You think about The Notebook. But man, that was a great movie, man. I loved it. I watched it so many times. It's just I never it's just when the scene in the rain. That's it's I don't know. I'm smiling when I'm talking about the movie. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, the suspense is killing me.
I've said it a couple times. It's The Notebook.
Oh, I missed it. You said it fast enough that I thought I heard something else.
Yeah,
no, it's cool. The Notebook. Yeah, I've only seen that movie once.
I've seen it so many times, and it started my love affair with Rachel McAdams. She's just gorgeous, and I love her in everything she does. She's awesome. She's another one that chooses really interesting roles. It's not just leading lady quote unquote movie type movies, but she does awesome stuff too, and she's gorgeous. And Ryan Gosling is gorgeous, and they're in love, and
Ryan Gosling is Canadian.
I don't remember that part, but yeah, it's awesome. I like just the plot device of the movie, kind of how it's bookended by quote unquote The Notebook. How just their love story and the scene in the rain. It's just I don't know. It's a well made movie. I love watching it, and I think from what I read afterwards, they didn't like each other on set or something like that, and it made it awkward. But I can't see that in the movie. I think it works, and it's led to so many quotable lines that it's become a cheesy, cliche type movie. But I think that's for a reason. It's just well-made movies, good movies that really penetrate the culture. That's how they become cheesy because they're so good and everybody loves them. But everybody loves them for a reason. I thought it was an awesome movie.
It's a classic of the genre, like not romantic comedy so much, but like hardcore, like almost melodramatic romance, like getting you right in the feels. Yeah, I remember that movie was huge when it came out too. Like people loved it and like talked about it constantly. I do remember that.
And I wouldn't say I talked about it often, but it's just one of those that I always go back to and watch.
Movies nowadays, like we take it for granted that movies open huge. Like a movie comes out now, like imagine the Notebook coming out now, like it'd be all over social media. It'd be this huge deal. Back then, there wasn't so much of that, right? So like everybody kind of talking about it was more like it had almost like a equivalent level of hype that a movie might have of its kind now, without all the bells and whistles to get that hype train rolling. So I just remember it being super popular, and for a while there'd be people who were like, oh, I saw it like 3 times in the theater and stuff. It was like, that was a big movie, and I think I saw it with my high school girlfriend.
And I don't know if I did see it with a high school girlfriend, but it's one of the ones, if I did, then I'd always think about her when I watched it, because it cemented in my mind.
Like, I mean, it was my high school girlfriend, but it was after high school, because the movie came out in 2004, and I had a gap year. I was doing some extra stuff in between when I went to university in 2005. So that came out, in the summertime in 2004. That's coincidentally, that's the year my kid was born.
Yeah, see, magic. It's a magic movie. It was in the air. Just I don't know. Looking up, it wasn't over. It still isn't over. Just magic. All right, moving on. What was your number 3?
Sure. I'm gonna break our little streak of romantic movies here, and I'm gonna go completely the opposite direction to Conan the Barbarian. So that's one of my all-time favorite movies. Not my all-time favorite movie, one of them. And it's an totally underappreciated movie. A lot of people just like write it off as like a meathead Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, but what's so special about it is it's kind of, in some ways, sort of what I was thinking about Blade Runner. It's more about the tone, the atmosphere, and the sort of visual palette and the music and how these things all kind of come together to create an experience. Like when you watch the opening sequence of Conan the Barbarian, it takes like I think 20 minutes or something before there's even a line of dialogue. It's all done with this like pounding score and visuals. It's one of the most visual minimalist movies that I think was ever made by an American filmmaker. You know, without trying to, because it's definitely a cocaine movie. But, you know, like it is. And if you listen, one of the best commentary tracks of all time is the commentary track where John Milius and Arnold Schwarzenegger drink wine and talk about it. They do a commentary track of Conan the Barbarian, and they recorded it like 30 years later or something. It's awesome. But that's one of my all-time favorite movies. And for years, I didn't have any access to it besides watching it on TV. And so I'd catch bits and pieces of it, or I'd watch it, and I didn't know if I'd seen the whole thing until I was older. And they would edit out the stuff, like they'd edit out the nudity, they'd edit out the hardcore violence. So I think like I never saw the true version of it until I was maybe like 12, and not because I had to like, you know, dodge like my parents or anything, because they didn't care, but just because I was watching it on cable TV and they just didn't show the movie in its full glory. Like, because it's pretty gritty. They didn't show the movie that way on TV, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one of the big ones for me. Like, to this day, if I had cable and Conan the Barbarian came on, all I would need to hear is, like, one just note of that score, and my butt would be on the couch.
Actually, I've never seen it, so...
I know.
We've talked about that before, yeah, so I'll let you gush. It's one of those, you know... I don't know, just never interested me. It's just not really my genre, so...
Honestly, it's not that common. Like, if it has any popularity at all, it's going to be in people even older than I am. I think most of the people that I know that are into movies that are younger than me, so 32 younger, they either never watched it or it wasn't a very big deal to them growing up. But for me, it's like a movie I grew up with just because I think that it just happened to be on TV a lot when I was a kid. And it definitely is my genre. Like sword and sorcery and fantasy were where I was really, really into that stuff when I was younger. Yeah. I'm less into it now than I was. You're probably more into fantasy now than I am, but I was really into it when I was a kid. I just ate that stuff up.
Yeah, it came out in what, 82, so that's just that's well. I watched a lot of Xena Warrior Princess and
me too, man.
Hercules. I mean, those are my bag. So if that would have came out around that certain time, I'm sure I'd love it too. But have
you ever seen the Beastmaster? Like OG?
Yeah.
I love the movie, not the show.
Oh no, I like the show. I didn't care for the movie. Yeah.
Oh, I love the movie. That's another. I could almost go Conan / Beastmaster.
Yes, that's a little bit before my era.
Yeah.
All right.
What's next for you?
Probably my number 4. I'm gonna step away from the romantic genre before I go back to it. But my number 4 is gonna be Major Payne. That's just one of those ones.
Major Payne.
It's actually because I watched it, I don't know, a whole bunch of times when I was a kid, and then didn't see it for like a decade, and just randomly, me and my wife were watching. I don't know, it was TV or something to where it was on. We saw it, press play, and it's just one of those that came, you know it word for word. It's just one of, like I said, I guess it's just because you watched it so much as a kid, it just stuck with you. Just word for word, I knew the movie. It was awesome. It was funny. It did weird things. There's like a dance sequence in the middle. It's just comedic, and it's Damon Wayans, so it's not a quote unquote comedy, but it's like a adventure comedy. I think that's how it's related. I mean, how it's labeled, but it's not a funny movie, but it's humorous. I don't know. It's just one of those ones that stuck with me. I loved it from top to bottom. You drop me in the very middle of it, I can quote it. There's a scene where I don't know if. Wait, have you seen Major Payne? You know what I'm talking about?
No, but I remember the trailer, and I when I was a kid, I still like I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, and he's in that, and then some of his brothers or cousins, I can't remember how all the Wayans are related, but Don't Be a Menace in South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood was
Drinking Jenny Juice in the Hood.
Yeah. Did I get the title wrong? Fuck. There goes my cred. But that movie was like on rotation in my house. My mom loved it. I don't know why to this day, but she loved it. So this is what I mean about not being censored when I was a kid. I was watching that movie on VHS when I was I don't know, young, really young. So to the point where I had no idea what was going on. It took me years of watching the movies that it was lampooning for me to understand all the jokes. But I also think The Last Boy Scout is one of the most underrated Bruce Willis movies, and he's in that too. So Damon Wayans, I like Damon Wayans. But I have never seen Major Payne. I'm gonna have to now.
Yeah, see, those are more because the whole family, they're all brothers. It's like they did comedic stuff, comedic movies.
They are all brothers?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So honestly, they're probably they don't get enough credit just in the movie industry for what they've done. I mean that is a powerhouse family.
Well, they're like an institution, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the Wayne's family has done so much, and now even Damon Jr. is doing movies and TV shows and stuff. So just, I mean that family doesn't get enough credit. But yeah, anyway, they mostly do more comedic and riffs on stuff or whatever, more comedic movies. But Major Payne was more of a straightforward movie with some funny bits to it or whatever. Basically, the story is he's a super killer, a army man through and through. He's been in the army all his life. All he knows how to do is kill. And they, I guess the army says, you know what, the army's changing. We don't really need guys like you to be super killers anymore. It's drones and, whatever it is these days where the army's changing. So they just find somewhere to put them. So they stash him to be a head drill sergeant or whatever for an ROTC camp for kids. And, you can see him being super badass and having no give or whatever for these kids. And, throughout the course of the movie, he becomes more lighthearted and there's love interest, So, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it really works on pretty much, I guess I did choose another romantic movie, didn't I? Dang it.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, there's I was talking about earlier, there's a scene at the end where the kids are like in a, military competition where they have to march in order and, do whatever. And the kids kind of tweak it and they have some hip hop music and they're spinning their rifles and, what's his name? Eddie, Orlando Brown. So, he was big on Disney Channel when he grew up or whatever, but that was his first kind of, movie role or whatever. But watching the guy that grew up to be on Disney Channel just kind of, he like does this little dance move or whatever. It's so cute. It's just, I don't know. It's just, that movie really just, it was cemented in my childhood. I saw that so much and I loved it. And watching it 10 years later, I knew every word. It's just, that's kind of one of my go-to favorites. I probably wouldn't put it on my top 10 movies of all time list or whatever, but that's what this list is for. It's just those movies that really stick with you, that kind of define, your adolescence or whatever you coming up. Those movies that really just are personal to you. And this is one of those. I loved it.
We should totally do an episode someday, by the way, of like stuff that holds up from when we were kids and stuff that doesn't.
Yeah, and this definitely holds up. I mean, it's clearly made in the 90s, so but I mean, it's at a military school, so it's not gonna not hold up as much as a regular high school movie would, because these days kids in class are gonna be talking on their cell phones, all that kind of stuff. You're not gonna see that in a military school, so it probably hold up a little better just being the type of movie it is. But I don't know, I loved it, and there's a dance scene in the middle. Yeah, there are little moments like in the dance scene, he does Michael Jackson moves and does a moonwalk, whatever. They're just little moments like that just stick with you. This is, I don't know, it's probably one of my favorite, my favorite movies to watch on this list. But
nice.
Yeah. All right, so I think we're down to your number 4, right?
Number 4, okay. So I'm gonna throw another movie that, now this is a newer one, relatively speaking, and I watch it every year on purpose. Like I watch it, I deliberately watch it once a year. It's almost like a little, like, kind of like, I don't know, like a holiday for me or something, like a little ritual I do. So that would be the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
So Kingdom of Heaven is the best to me in its genre of the like historical action kind of movies. Ridley Scott's done a number of them, but there's definitely plenty of them, and they have a pretty wide like variety
like
of quality
Troy.
levels.
Yeah.
So you get your like Troy's, right? Like Troy's a good example of one that's good to great, and then you got your like shitty ones like King Arthur with Clive Owen. It's all right, but compared to like Kingdom of Heaven or Gladiator or Troy, it's not that great, right? So there's a range there, right? And Kingdom of Heaven to me is the pinnacle. I don't think Conan the Barbarian is really the same kind of movie, but if we were going to say that it kind of was, it would still be above that for me. So I love that movie. I'll defend Orlando Bloom in it, even though Ridley Scott wanted Paul Bettany. It has maybe my all-time favorite film script, my favorite screenplay. So I revisit it every year. I always appreciate new things with the performance. The movie is like a murderer's row of actors, some of which are more famous now than they were then. Others were famous kind of during or before that movie came out. And I don't know, it's just like top tier if you like a good historical movie with that with a lot of great action sequences in it.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've seen it just because it was big when it came out, but have you seen it?
I probably did, but I have no memory of it. So
Well,
I
if
guess
you
it's
do,
one of the things. We just have different genres. So like you may have, like you saw Serendipity, but it just doesn't stick. It's probably the same way
yeah,
for me.
yeah. That's a good way of connecting them because yeah, Serendipity I kind of remember but not super well. So I would say though, if you ever do revisit it, check out the director's cut. Don't watch the theatrical cut because the theatrical cut a whole bunch of subplots out of the movie. And you know how like for a little while there, like there was lots of director's cuts coming out, and most of them were just like throwing a couple minutes back into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think the
Released
only
the
essential.
Zack Snyder cut.
Oh, sorry.
I said release the Zack Snyder cut.
Oh, the release is that. Okay. I don't know what I thought I heard there, but that's pretty good.
Sorry,
so yeah, like
around.
I don't think there is a Zack Snyder cut personally, but whatever. So
Yeah, I know.
Ridley Scott though was famous for having director's cuts that are actually worthwhile. Like his director's cut, like Blade Runner is a great example. There's like 4 different versions of that movie, and he made his final cut of it, I think like less than 10 years ago. Because I remember buying it while I was in university, but I don't remember how long ago that was. But that's the definitive version now, I think. But like his director's cut for Gladiator is, I think, slightly better than the original cut. And then with Kingdom of Heaven, it is the quintessential director's cut. It is the director's cut that justifies the existence of director's cuts because it is a completely different movie when you watch the director's cut. So if you do ever watch it, that's what I recommend. It's 3 hours long, man. But if you can watch To Meet Joe Black, you can watch Kingdom of Heaven.
Indeed. Well, if I do check it out, I'll be sure to check that version out. All right, so my number 5, my last one here. It's another one of those movies that I count as my favorite movies as well, not just my favorite go to whatever. It's probably I don't know, my top 5 of all time favorite movies. I've seen this a whole bunch. I watch it every year, Christmas time. There's a special scene that I can quote word for word that I have done many times. And my final romantic movie is When Harry Met Sally. That's the go-to. That's the cliche as well. Just like The Notebook, that's a cliche romantic comedy. But man, this one, I don't know, just for whatever reason, it stuck with me. I love it. Just the best friends falling in love, whatever relationship, and just there's so many quotable lines in it. Just so much comes from that. It's directed by Rob Reiner. As I said, I think that's my favorite director. I just love so many of his movies. Just his tone really works for me. But just the writing is so quippy or whatever. It's tight, and just you get to see Carrie Fisher in there. It's just so, I don't know. And I really like Meg Ryan type movies. Just I guess I put her in the same category as John Cusack, where she was just right for that era.
Yeah, I think she's due for a comeback. I think Meg Ryan.
Yeah, just so many of her, movies done in the 90s or whatever were just perfect. Just The Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, probably my favorite Nick Cage movie of all time, City of Angels. That's probably another one. See, there's so many runner-ups I could have put on this list. Just I've seen City of Angels so many times. It's just I like Meg Ryan in that era. Just all those movies really spoke to me. That's kind of my when I talk about being a romantic comedy guy, I'm talking about Meg Ryan movies. I love pretty much all of those. But yeah,
City of Angels makes me cry like a baby.
Yeah, but he did so. And no, we're not gonna get into it.
Don't go back to that place.
We're not gonna get into it. But yeah, so just just seeing them, being besties or whatever, and how he starts the movie saying men and women can't be friends, and she was like, of course they can. And by the end of the movie, the middle of the movie, they're like, well, men and women can be friends, we prove it. And by the end of the movie, they're in love. And, just you've heard that so many times, that little speech. It's not because I'm lonely, it's not because it's New Year's Eve, I'm here because when you decide you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. That's a magical line. I don't know.
Memorized it. It must be.
Yeah, that's just. How come? That's amazing writing, and he doesn't say that at midnight. Like midway through the speech, midnight comes, and he says it like at 12, in 10 seconds or whatever. It's just, I don't know. It's the directing was perfect. That's one of those romantic comedy type movies that just really stuck with me, and it's just. I guess I'm just that kind of guy. So if it's Tuesday night and I feel like watching something comfortable, I'm putting on one of these and I've seen, as I said, I usually watch When Harry Met Sally around like Christmas and New Year's time because of that little scene. But I don't know, I've seen it so many times. It's one of those comfort movies. It's really just one of those touchstones for me. I assume you've seen that.
When Harry Met Sally, yeah, but only once, and as an adult. Like, it wasn't part of my, I'm as we're talking about this, it's interesting because I keep thinking about my mom and like what her viewing habits were like, what she found funny or interesting, what she found scary. It probably, like, the movies like that would have probably for a lot of people been something they would have watched when they were younger, maybe with their parents, because it's an older movie, right? I didn't, I've got other ones, some weird ones really, but that wasn't one of them. So I didn't watch it. I knew what it was. I knew it had a reputation. And isn't it a running joke in, is it there's something about Mary where they keep talking about that movie?
I've seen that one time, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So I've seen that a dozen times, right? Just because it was like I don't even know if I like that movie now, but it was on a lot when I was a kid. And anyway, they taught. I knew that it was supposed to be one of the greatest love stories. Like, maybe I'm thinking of Harold and Maude, and that's the joke. Anyway, whatever. I've seen both of them anyway, but I saw them like a few years ago with friends who were like, "You've never seen When Harry Met Sally? You've got to watch When Harry Met Sally." Because I have this friend who's like, she's like you, dude. She watches romantic comedies. That's her genre. That's her major. That's like, she knows everything about them. You guys could go on for days.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. And it came out, I was born in 88. It came out in 89. So it's not like a movie that I saw in my, in my youth, just like I guess with Conan with you, it came out,
yeah,
the year after when I was 1, but it's just, you watch it and it just sticks. It just works, so yeah.
I definitely thought it was memorable. It's not like Serendipity where I kind of forgot about it. I remember parts of When Harry Met Sally very, very well. Like, I remember the diner scene and,
Yeah. I don't know, like I said, there's so many, just watching it again, there's so many moments that are just memorable, I guess.
Well, it's super influential too. Like, when I was watching it, one of the benefits of watching it for the first time when you're older was that it showed me how a lot of the romantic comedies that I'd seen that were made after it were hearkening back to it, So sometimes it felt like I'd seen it before, only because it was so influential. And there were so many movies that were just basically ripping it off, that I had seen before I saw it, right? So it's always nice to see what the source was.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of, skipping certain movies, is that when you're older and you watch it and you've seen a bunch of other stuff, like, you'll see some movie that you thought was great because it did a certain thing, but actually it was just biting a movie that came out 10 years before. You just didn't know it. So
yeah.
I mean, but I guess that's a good thing, movies that are
it can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, they're so influential that they spark copycats or whatever, and because it's such a good moment or such a good plot or whatever it may be, that it should live on, and people get to experience that in another movie even if they didn't get to see it in the first one. So it's not necessarily a terrible thing, but yeah, I don't mind it. But okay, so what was your last one?
My last one, so I'm looking at my list, and there's actually 2 that I haven't mentioned, 3 that I haven't mentioned yet, so we'll talk about runner-ups later, but okay. I've been kind of thinking this whole time, which one of these am I actually going to put in my last spot that I get here? So I'm going to have to go with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because...
now you're cheating. Cheating.
Am I? How? Because you wanted to
pick
say
one movie. That one movie is going to be the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So
but here's the thing. Like, I'm one of those crazy fuckers who watches the whole thing every year or two, all 11 and a half hours of it.
Oh, wow.
Last time I did it, it was with a buddy of mine who baked scones, and he called them, like, he looked up a recipe on the internet and called them lembas scones. Like, that's how hardcore it can get. Although, weird part of that story is we're sitting there, and the whole time I'm looking at he's got a speaker set up in front of his TV somewhere, and he's got a couple of lawn gnomes fucking on top of it. That was distracting, watching the movie with that there. So that's the last time I watched it anyway. But every year or two, I'll sit down and I'll watch all of those movies. And, if you want me to narrow it down a little bit, I'll say that Fellowship of the Ring is the one of them that is my most go-to. Like, I just put that movie on sometimes just to escape into, like, the verisimilitude. That's a big word, but basically the realism of the world that it takes place in, and all the tactile details, the costumes, like the grease on Viggo Mortensen's face when he's sweating in a fight, like, just every little thing about it is just so on point. And then later it gets way more CG heavy and a little bit more bloated in terms of plot. And then the Hobbit movies, we don't speak of those. So, like, Fellowship of the Ring would be the one. If you want me to not cheat, I'll narrow it down to that.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, well,
That brings us back to romance, though. I mean, right? Because not only is it a romance in the epic literary sense, but it's also a very romantic movie, even though there's not a lot of like actual love story in it. It's bromantic, you know?
Yeah. Indeed. Well, I mean, we're having some fun here, so this isn't one of the strict episodes. So what are your runners up? You know, what's another one that you like but just couldn't make the list?
Well, I've got two, but I'll start with just one. And again, it's another cheat. It's the Matrix trilogy.
Yeah, you're a big cheater today. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but again, same thing. The first Matrix movie is the one that I enjoy going back to every year or so. And the sequels, I'm a completionist at heart, so if I'm going to watch the first one, I'm usually going to watch the other two. And so I end up sitting down and watching all three of them. And you know, like The Matrix was my Star Wars. Like when I was in high school, I was on the forums talking about The Matrix. The way that people nowadays go on the forums, they talk about Star Wars or Marvel or whatever. That was my shit. Like The Matrix was my whole world when I was like 16. Like I just wanted to live there. I wanted to learn everything about it. I watched all the extra stuff. I like read about it on the internet. Whatever game they were making, whatever they were doing, I was into. And it turned me into a lifelong fan of the Wachowskis, and I still support them, even though they haven't had a hit like The Matrix since, right? But I like a lot of their stuff, even though it's not perfect. So The Matrix is a big one for me. That's a big go-to. I take it you've got a runner-up too?
Yeah, I'm going to... I've got two as well. One is romantic, one is not. So I'm just going to go ahead and get the romantic one out the way, and that's Hitch, the Will Smith movie. That's another one that's just you can watch that anytime. Just that's prime charming Will Smith. You know, Hitch Will Smith is why we tolerate Suicide Squad Will Smith. You know, it's just him being Will Smith in that movie just gives us so much credit or leeway in his bank account that even when he swings and misses in a couple movies, we give him credit for it. But I don't know, it's just that's not one of the greatest romantic comedies ever made, not one of the worst. Just a solid, funny romantic whatever movie that makes you laugh, and that's great. So it wasn't good enough to get into my top 5, but it's another one of those where I've seen it a bunch of times. It's great when it comes on. I like Eva Mendes, so it's one of my faves, my favorite romantic comedies. But all right, what was your last one?
Well, I'm about to cheat again. So this time though, I have a last one. I know. I'm sorry. I'm hoping that I can get you to say one more, because we do have a bit of more time. We've gotten through these a little faster than I think we planned. Partly because I don't remember. I've seen every movie you've mentioned, but like Serendipity, Hitch, I don't remember super well. I only saw it the one time. So my cheat was to mention my Will Smith go-to movie, which is Independence Day.
See, okay, so that's one of the ones I've seen and I thought was fine, but I didn't. I don't know why it became such the cultural force that it was. I guess because of Will Smith, but
sort of because it's fucking ridiculous mostly.
Yeah.
Like it's a ridiculous, bombastic movie.
That's the thing. I think when it came out, people just kind of took it at face value and just really liked it. But I think over time, as kind of faded, that's when the Family Guy started stepping in, and Seth MacFarlane started doing this thing, and they mock it, and I'm gonna give the alien ship a virus. It's just where it
became memeified.
You take into account how silly it was. And
oh, totally. I grew up with it though. Like I think that's a movie I saw not when it came out in theaters, but we had a drive-in in my hometown. That's how podunk we were. So we go out to the drive-in, and our movies were like second run. So we would get movies like a few months after they came out in theaters in the big city. So like we would go to the drive-in, and Independence Day, Terminator 2, like lots of those were like my early 90s childhood big deal movies, because I did not get to go to the drive-in very often. We did not have a car when I was growing up. So it would always be like a friend of the family or an aunt and uncle or something like that taking me, right? So Independence Day, I was locked in before it became a joke. So it's still a movie I have a lot of nostalgia for, and it's my Will Smith nostalgia movie. He's better in other movies, and I think there's other Will Smith movies that I like more, but Independence Day is always the one I think of when I think of him.
Yeah. Just and kind of to carry on what I was saying earlier, how Hitch is the prime Will Smith that kind of gave us what Will Smith is and gave his charming or whatever credits in the bank. I think that's Jeff Goldblum's what made Jeff Goldblum the guy we liked. I mean, obviously, I think even I think we kind of think of Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park as kind of a sex symbol. I think
Yeah.
I think he was fun, in it. But I think over time, when people make gifs of the movie or whatever, then they show him doing the lay down with his shirt open kind of thing. But I think Independence Day is when he became the neurotic and what we kind of make fun of Jeff Goldblum for being kind of Jeff Goldblum. That's kind of what cemented him in his stardom or whatever. But
yeah, if Jurassic Park got the ball rolling and Fly was in there kind of as a foretelling of what was going to happen, then I think you're right. Independence Day is where it got, again, locked in. It got locked in.
That's when he became, quote unquote, Jeff Goldblum instead of just being Jeff Goldblum the person.
And then he never came back. He's been Jeff Goldblum ever since.
I think my favorite reference is did you ever watch the TV show Community?
The TV show Community, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's a bit where Joel McHale, he kind of gets neurotic or whatever, and then Abed says, "You're Jeff Goldblum," and he goes, "Jeff Goldblum? What's that? I don't know what you mean." I'm doing a terrible bit of it, but just watching it, it's like, okay, yeah, that's definitely Jeff Goldblum. He's giving off the Jeff Goldblum vibe.
Yeah, he starts doing an impression.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of.
I remember that.
Yeah, Independence Day is when he became that to pop culture or whatever. But
man, Community, I started watching a couple of years after it became popular, kind of like maybe I'd heard of it a bunch and then I watched it and it got me through a really tough time. Like I was going through a really bad breakup when I started watching it, and that show, like the first season or two, really clicked hard for me. Like that show was a big deal for me for a number of years. So,
yeah, I mean, I know the internet likes that TV show, and I think it gets its due, but I still think it's underrated because just the writing and what they did with the genre pieces and the paintball stuff. I think that was an awesome show.
Oh, I think so much of the jokes go over people's heads is why it feels underrated. Like people like the easy stuff, like I hate to say anything bad at all about Donald Glover in the show because he's fucking awesome in it, but I think people think he's funny in kind of a shticky kind of like almost like a Tracy Morgan kind of way, but he's so good. There's stuff he's doing in that show that is just like beyond the pale, and I don't know if people necessarily get Community. I think that's kind of maybe why it feels underrated. You hear people talk about it and say nice things, and you're waiting for them. You're like waiting for them to say more, to say what to get to the real juicy parts. I feel that way a lot with Rick and Morty fans. I feel like a lot of Rick and Morty, I feel like it's popular, but I feel like a lot of people that like the show don't really get it. And so when I listen to them talk about it, it's always kind of shallow. That's how I feel.
There are certain shows where the writing is just so well done that it's next level. But then there are some where like a 30 Rock where the jokes are incredibly well done, but they're not laugh out loud jokes. You just kind of chuckle to yourself and you appreciate the writing for being funny. Totally. But I think Community is just, you laugh just because just what they do and just that was, it's laugh out loud funny. You just appreciate it and you know that those writers are killing it,
Yeah, and the cast is bringing it completely to life. Like everything's working, especially the first 3 seasons of that show. Every single element works in tandem perfectly. And then it kind of has a dip in quality and then it has another dip in quality. You know what I mean? But it stayed at least watchable the whole time. Do you want to hear my real last one?
All right, what's that?
Highlander. Fucking Highlander.
The first one? The original one?
Yeah, the original. Yeah. OG Highlander. The first one that ever, not the TV show, because that's fine, but the original movie with Christopher Lambert and Clancy Brown and the Queen soundtrack. That is one of my, again, it's a terrible movie by all reason. It kind of. But it's also awesome. Oh, yeah, and of course, Sean Connery playing a Spanish guy. Yeah. So the Spanish guy, is played by Sean Connery, and the French guy is playing the Scottish guy, and it's a whole mess. But Highlander is fucking awesome. And when I was growing up, whenever that, remember I always told you, when I was a kid, anything with swords?
Mm.
So imagine being kid me, watching a movie about people who have swords and are immortal, and have been fighting each other with swords throughout time, and we get to go to the past and the history, and then we get to be nowadays with guys pulling swords out of their trench coats, and they're having fights in parking garages, and they're cutting each other's heads off. I'm spoiling the movie a little bit, maybe, or the premise at least. But,
everybody knows what Highlander's about.
Good. Everybody should know what Highlander's about. That is one of those cultural musts, I think. But yeah, so that movie just for me was awesome, and I love the Queen soundtrack. I love it. To this day, I've got it on rotation. I'll listen to it every now and then, every single track. So yeah, that's a big one for me.
That's one of the ones. I've seen it. It was cool. I think I liked the TV show better than the the movie, but neither one that just really stuck with me. I just thought the premise was cool. I like, there can only be one in the power kind of thing, but
you just don't like swords enough, Sterling.
Maybe
you're a magic guy.
Just,
if this were Dungeons and Dragons, you'd be a mage, and I'd be a fucking barbarian or something.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I thought it was cool, but like I said, it didn't have that impact on me like it did you for whatever reason.
Partly, I think, just because I grew up with it. You know what I mean? Like it was so like the big connection between most of the movies I've mentioned is that I grew up watching them. Like I've watched movies like religiously since I was very very young. And there's just certain ones that like I watched so much when I was a kid, either because I had them on VHS, like because my mom bought them, or like they were just around, or because they were on TV all the time, and those ones just stuck. You know?
Yeah, same with me. Like I said, Major Payne, Notebook, Fifth Element. It's just when you're a kid, before you have a social life or whatever it is, you're just at the house, and if something's on TV. TNT shows The Fifth Element every Tuesday at 5:00. You just end up seeing it a bunch of times for whatever reason.
Yeah. I think I think my Major Payne is Hook. That's the kids movie that I watched a ton. Yeah. There's that's a thing we could almost fork off like any one of these, like we have kind of into like a bunch of side discussions about the people that were in it or the kind of movie that it was. Totally.
Yeah. All right. Let me wrap it up for my final one. That's going to be The Prince of Egypt. It's just, I don't know. It's just the marvel that movie was. I don't know. It just stuck with me, and it's one I've seen a whole bunch of times. And the songs are beautiful. And you see the story of Moses, and they're dark skinned people. It's just the fact that this was made in 1998. I don't know. It's powerful. It's a well-made story, and it's a religious story. I think these days, I don't think anything like this could be made. People of color in Egypt, religious story with God. Moses parting the Red Sea or whatever. I just don't think that this kind of thing could be made today just because of politics and whatever. So the fact that this came out in 98 and was as good as it was and had the music that it had, Whitney Houston killing it, so I don't know. It was an amazing movie. And it's just one of those, I don't know if it's one of the ones where I turn on and watch all the time, because it's not on the TV all the time. It's not one of your go-tos on a Tuesday night or whatever. But when it's on, you watch it, just because you owe it, just give it the respect it deserves kind of thing. I've seen it a bunch of times, and, like I said, I think it's an awesome movie for what it was and the fact that it exists. And like I said, anytime it's on TV and I'm flipping through the channels, I'll sit down and watch it because, it's The Prince of Egypt. But
yeah, that one made an impact. I've seen Prince of Egypt a number of times, and I watched it a lot when I was a kid when it came out, not quite a kid, but around when it came out, I was like middle schoolish, I think. But I watched it a bunch then. And then when I was older and I had my daughter, I got to rediscover it because it was one of her favorites when she was like 6, 7 years old. So we used to watch it every now and then because she would watch the same shit over and over again. And I would like sit down. I love animated films, as you know. So I would sit down and watch it with her all the time. So I got to see it through my own eyes when it came out, and then I got to come back and see it through her eyes when she was older, which is pretty cool. And you'll know all about that in the next few years.
I hope so. I can't, like I said, I think when I was watching Major Payne with my wife, the whole time, I just felt, I don't know, it's going to be too deep for the podcast, but I felt incomplete watching it because I had so much joy and nostalgia watching it. And, it's nice watching it with your wife, I'm glad, but she's seen it too, and we're sharing it together. But that's you really want to just watch that with your kid. That's just kind of one of those movies that meant a lot to you and are a good movie, period. And that's just, you want to sit down and watch that with your kid just to give it to them. I know it's kind of a weird way to describe it, but that's just, it's kind of one of those things even not Fifth Element, even
it's like passing the torch, right?
Yeah,
it's like something that meant a lot to you when you were a kid, you think says something worthwhile to kids. You pass that on to them, kind of, right?
And even if they don't like it, that's okay because they'll know you loved it, and that's the kind of thing that's it lives on. So that was my our list of movies
with some extras. We got some extra juicy sprinkles in there from us.
Indeed, yeah. So it was nice having a one-off, just having some fun, just kind of discussing some movies, not necessarily something new, but just going to the back catalog, just kind of talking about what we liked and who we are, and just kind of getting to know each other. So I appreciate that. This was fun. Yeah.
And hey guys at home, listen, like let us know if you like this format. If you like this kind of episode. It is a little bit more personal, and we're still figuring this out. So if you like this one and you want to hear more episodes where we kind of dig back through the back catalog, stuff that we grew up with, stuff that we like, different categories, ways of talking about movies. Like we talked a lot about when we were kids. I was saying that we could do something where we could talk about the movies that hold up from when we were kids and the ones that don't. If you want to see more or hear more of those kinds of things, you let us know. Yeah.
Indeed. And then you can find us at sirrsmovies@gmail.com or just add us on Twitter at sirrsmovies. And if you are listening to this and have a Twitter, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at sirrsmovies, SIRRSMOVIES. So that way it just gets interaction. Let us know what you like, so we can grow together. This is new. And we're actually thinking about adding some more personalities to the mix. So, look forward to that in the future. But yeah, Evan, where can people find you on the internet right now?
Right now, you can find me writing reviews for Sterling at sirwalka.com. I got one for The Kid Who Would Be King that just came out, so you guys can check that out. You can also get me at Evan Todd-McCoy, all one word, lowercase, on Twitter. So as usual, you can find me also on my own blog, thunderclam.wordpress.com. I'm leaving reviews in there every now and then for stuff that I'm not writing on sirwalka.com about. Usually longer form reviews with more analysis. I have a 5,000-word review of Glass on there, so you can check that out if you want a more in-depth dive. Although we got pretty deep with our podcast episode, so check that out too if you're interested in what we think about Glass.
Indeed, and you can find me at Sirwaka on Twitter, SIRRWAKA, and obviously sirwaka.com. Next week, we'll be doing the Lego Movie 2, the second part, so look forward to that. All right, well, thank you guys for listening with us this week, and see you next week.
See ya.